Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention, maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. G'day, and welcome to Voice of Gord. Some notes. Last episode in my intro, I made a mistake. I told you guys I was going to the Great American Trucking Show. I'm actually going to MATS, the Mid-America Trucking Show. Both of them are things, or at least have been at some point. I have never been to either, but this is what happens when you podcast when you're really tired and wore out and you just make mistakes. So anyway, my apologies to the folks at MATS. I will hope to see you guys there. It's at the end of March in Louisville, Kentucky, the Mid-America Trucking Show. Next week, I have my very first book review is coming out. I reviewed Data-Driven Truckers Technology and the New Workplace Surveillance by Professor Karen Levy of Cornell University. I'm really looking forward to this. And I'm also going to be speaking with Professor Levy and recording it for this very show. And I hope to be releasing that in the next couple of weeks. I think especially my fellow truck driving friends are really going to enjoy that one. Today's episode, I spoke with my friend Dee, who's a public school teacher and works for the union that represents her school and acts as a representative between sort of two levels of unions. And we discussed the disconnect between unions and their sort of duty to defend their members' interests, specifically downstream of the COVID-19 situation. We also discussed the seeming hostility from certain labor unions in Canada to the Freedom Convoy. Very interesting conversation. I think you guys will like it. Dee is very well spoken. We also discussed a little bit the reckoning I think we all need to have with what's gone on in the last 3 years. Without any further delay, here's my talk with my friend Dee. G'day everyone, and welcome to Voice of Gord. I'm Gord, and this is my voice. The other voice we're going to hear today is an old friend of mine from back in Canada, who is a teacher and is represented by a public school teachers union and works in various capacities with them. And we are going to discuss today the disconnect between public sector unions and the Freedom Convoy in Canada, and why the labor union movement as a whole basically abandoned us and abandoned their own membership with regards to Trudeau and various other countries' vaccine mandates. My friend's name is going to be shortened for her own privacy. We're just going to call her Dee. And Dee happened to participate at least one weekend of the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa. And
2 weekends.
2 weekends. Oh, one more than me. Right. So a warm welcome, everyone, to Dee.
And the crowd goes wild, no doubt.
Yeah.
Hi, Gord. It's great to be here.
Well,
Thanks.
I've been looking forward to this one. I think this is a question that needs some exploration, and given your position as a teacher and as someone who works within your local union, and as I also recall, you're some kind of representative between your local and the provincial level big cheeses. Is that correct?
It's correct. Although the more work I do with that particular group, the less enthusiastic I am about having any kind of movement happening that's positively influenced by my presence. But we can maybe dig into that a bit. I'm actually supposed to go to a meeting tomorrow for that provincial union get together. And I'm a little bit on the fence. I have a supply teacher booked under a code for that. And do I just switch it over to a sick day and not attend and spend my time elsewhere? Or do I go and bite my tongue and come home really mad and keep it booked as a day where I'm doing union business? I'm actually undecided at this point because things went so poorly the last time.
Do you think
What do
they're
you think?
going to progress in a positive fashion if more people such as yourself refuse to participate with them?
Of course. But that's been the situation all along, hasn't it? Where if more people would just say no, this would have been over before we knew it. But
Right.
people
So,
didn't say no and aren't saying no.
right. Well, before we get too deep into it, for the benefit of my audience, you can give us a little background on yourself, such details that you feel comfortable sharing and that which is relevant to the conversation.
Okay, so I'm an elementary school teacher in the province of Ontario. I've been teaching for just over 20 years. What else? I do love freedom, and the people who fight for it. I love children and seeing them learn and grow. And I'm a person who advocates for what is right, both in my own personal life and professionally. And in the last few years, I have been met with some challenges seeing that come to light. So I appreciate you having me on your show, and I hope that I can shed a little light anyway for people in terms of what's going on in the public education sector and how that has been affected by all the politics.
Yeah, well, it seems like um, public schools are amongst the they're the lonely single guys holding up the wall at the dance after everybody else has got a date and has exited the building. Like they still believe the party to be going on when it's long since been abandoned by everybody else. And you have to wonder what the reasons for that are.
Well, I think like lots of things in Canada, we run on the kind of goodwill of what has happened in the past. We think our government is good intrinsically. They're out to support us, and we're all in this big happy Canadian family together. And public education is a huge part of that. People come as immigrants from all over the place, my parents included, and they send their kids to the closest school to where they're living, the neighborhood school. And that's been good enough for decades, even longer than that. I'm a product of the public education system, and I'm a firm believer that it's the right thing for kids to be at their neighborhood school within walking distance with the mixed bag of other kids who are coming in from all their homes. And maybe they speak the same language, maybe they don't, but you all have something in common, and that's the community, the park nearby, the outdoor experiences that you share, going to the same markets, going to the same libraries. Um, and for a long time, Canada was really good at providing quality public education. Now, somewhere in the last, I'd say 15 years, that really started to take a nosedive, and our standards have been sliding. Our budgets have as well. I think we're paid fairly in terms of being a professional with a career and a salary that reflects that, but I don't know that the operating budgets and the things that are coming down from the board and the ministry reflect best practice.
Right. And such as you have any way to voice your concerns around all of this through the union you're a member of, um, has your union observed this slide or degradation of delivery of education services, as you've put it, for the last 15 years? Or have they said or done anything about it at all?
When it suits them, for sure. When there's a new board being elected, or when it's electioneering time in terms of provincial politics, they absolutely have a lot to say. Now, we have to remember that these unions tilt left heavily. And for a long time, most of my life, in fact, I thought I did as well. Um, Unfortunately, the things that are happening on the far left don't necessarily jive with what's best for kids. And so that is more and more, uh, it's obvious that there isn't ever going to be something that works out for both sides, kids and the left.
Well, whatever happened, I mean, if I could boil my observations about all of this into one question, it would be, um, when and why did they abandon the concept of age appropriateness with certain things?
Great question. When and why? The when probably started, I'd say, in the last just under a decade, where it really became obvious that something was awry. And the why is a bigger pot to stir. So the when, I can tell you exactly. For me, I always had a hand in the grade 6 sex ed portion of the curriculum, because the girls and boys would be separated. Generally, the homeroom teacher would do sex ed in May or June when hormones are rampant in that grade. And, I'd be part of that conversation with the grade 6 girls, and they'd put their anonymous notes in a box, and we would have girl time, and they could talk freely about their questions and concerns, and we could guide them in a way that I felt confident, where I wasn't in conflict with anybody's personal upbringings at home, families who are very modest, um, things like that. And then things started to creep in, things from manufacturers of products. So birth control, tampons started making their way as freebies or things to be discussed with, you know, with a guidebook heavily promoting agendas that may or may not be in alignment with what the actual curriculum says. And then there was the fateful phys ed curriculum change by the Ford government.
What happened there?
So the health curriculum falls under that title. It's phys ed and health. And so that's when things start to go a bit sideways. Yes, families look different. Yes, families can have all kinds of members, and what you call those adults in your life might differ from family to family. But the emphasis was still on, caring, loving, a home environment that is safe, your role as a child and student. And I think it's pretty easy for people to see now how things could be extraordinarily confusing for a young person being tasked to identify their gender when probably most of them at the time of being asked aren't even sure what a pronoun is. In terms of how we teach English, that's definitely the case, where they can't even circle a pronoun in a sentence, let alone break down what it might mean for someone to be choosing an alternative pronoun aside from he or she or it. So yeah, that's the when of it. And it's like a rock rolling downhill. It's gathering a lot of speed, and happy to say there's a bit of pushback from what I can see, but in Toronto, there's probably much less than other places, rural places especially.
Right. And what part of the, as you put it, the left or the far left has initiated this to your mind, and where do they bump into uh, provincial government curriculum advisors, as it were, and union representation of teachers?
Well, it's funny. I never knew until I started teaching that teaching was or would be so political. And whatever decisions get made provincially, you'd think that when another party comes into power, they would look critically at those changes and maybe possibly change some things back to how they were before the other party changed it. And that's not the case at all. So the Liberals were in power for a good stretch here in Canada, and the teachers benefited from that financially, but curriculum floundered and academic excellence floundered. When the Conservatives took it back, there was a lot of cuts. Some I agreed with, some I didn't. But then when the Liberals got back, none of those cuts that they cried about, no changes were made. So all those special programs for kids who are struggling, for kids with special needs, don't exist. And you can blame Mike Harris or you can blame them all, because lots of people have had a chance to bring back that funding and it hasn't happened. In terms of the union, socialism is strong. And does it work? I think it did for many years, just like public education did, where the unions were giving a collective voice to its members. And a lot of great things came out of it. I came from a strong union house growing up. My dad was a member of a number of labor unions in trades. And without the power of that collective bargaining, he wouldn't have been able to put his 2 kids through school, own 2 homes, 2 cars, with a wife who was a stay-at-home mom. It just wouldn't have been possible without what the unions afforded them. Now you can have 2 working parents struggling to pay for one house, maybe a car, and who's going to put the kids through university? Well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
If and when we get to it, and if it hasn't been washed away in a flood.
Correct.
So just for a lot of people that listen to me are Americans, and I got a few folks listening overseas. So the provincial teachers union in Ontario, what would you say the percentage of its membership having political affiliation and or membership in the New Democratic Party, who are the party in Canada one used to assume was for the working class and are now largely a creature of public sector unions only, and a lot of leftist ideological detritus, which most people don't have time for anymore?
What percentage? It's pretty high. I would say it's higher than it should be, because some people just automatically check that box without even really delving into what it means. So I would say, if I had to make an sort of good estimate, thinking about estimation skills and math, I'd say 75% you could pretty much bank on. It's probably a little higher than that. But yeah, roughly that. So 3/4, I would say.
So 3/4 of teachers that are members of your union, you would assume to be also members and or explicit supporters of the NDP.
Yes. And failing an actual vote for the NDP come election time. I think some of them default to Liberal, but it's almost 100%, I would say, Liberal and NDP combined.
Right. So have you heard in the past year, now that we are almost a year since Freedom Convoy, I'm really curious about what happened with the membership of the NDP, given that the big federal cheese, Mr. Jagmeet Singh, has made this really terrible deal with Justin Trudeau in order to keep Trudeau from being confidence motioned out of Parliament by everybody else there that isn't in the Liberal Party. And this deal that him and Singh made it was almost immediately after the Emergencies Act was revoked and, quote unquote, normality was returned to, whatever the hell that means. But to my mind, it seemed to me like a lot of people in the NDP forgot that, this weapon, this nuclear option that Trudeau had unleashed on the Freedom Convoy would also one day be unleashed on, whatever group the NDP might be supporting it at any given time, be it, Triantifa or some other, identity politics hustling group, anyone, an environmental group, who knows? And I have to wonder, I have to assume there's some smart people in the NDP who haven't been completely hoodwinked that are looking at what Singh has done and thought to themselves, this is not good. Like, one day Trudeau's going to use this on us, or some other prime minister in the future is going to use this on us or our comrades. Like, do you get a sense that anyone who is an NDP supporter thought that at all?
Nope.
Oh man, it's that bad.
No, I don't. I'm glad you asked. That was an easy answer. No, I don't. And I learned a lot in the last few years, specifically since March of 2020. I've learned a lot about human nature and about what it means, let's just leave it at human nature for a minute. No, I don't think any of them thought about any of it. And, there's a lot of memes circulating out there, the gist of which are, if you don't smell something out of the ordinary by now, really? So no, none of them have thought critically. I can't say none. I don't want to sweep it totally in one pile, but I would say of the people I've spoken with, in terms of the kinds of discussions that are had when teachers get together, when union people get together, no, I would say the overwhelming majority of them believe that their government is doing the right thing, is making good choices in hard times. The government is your friend. The government is there for us. And it's funny because you can put something in front of them that shows there's a conflict, and the mental gymnastics that are needed to sort of backflip away from making the connection is astounding.
Yeah, mental gymnastics should be like a new Olympic sport, because the last couple of years there's been some of the most fabulous performances of such I think I've ever seen, specifically with what happened in Canada and the Freedom Convoy, and basically the quasi-apartheid system that was set up by Trudeau and the premiers, which was based on 2 years of scapegoating, outgrouping, and moral panic over this virus, which all statistics have shown to be not very worrisome to anyone who doesn't have a comorbidity or is under the age of 60. And all of
Who
these
has
all of these mandates, right? Like you know, I've spoken with a few like legit Marxists in the past year, like people who've actually studied Marx, not just like leftoid douchebags, but like actual legitimate Marxists. And to a person, all of them were like, Marx would be rolling over in his grave because he was a firm believer in worker autonomy, right? Like the worker is like the ultimate unit of the collective, and you can't just go around abusing the worker's body. Like the whole point of Marxism and the point of unions is to fight back against the employers and the government from being able to push workers around. I mean, what's more primal and like important to a worker than your own bodily sovereignty and the decision about what you're going to put into it? And that just went right out the window. I mean, I picked up a little bit of notoriety writing a few pieces here and there, and one of the articles I wrote for Newsweek, I detailed how the entire union movement in Canada basically gave up on this concept. Like Canadian auto workers, steel workers, Teamsters, public teachers unions, the whole lot, all of them were in lockstep with Trudeau about these mandates, even though we all knew does not prevent transmission, does not prevent you from getting sick. Yet, this primacy of your right as a worker to make your own decisions about your bodily autonomy, they just threw it out the window completely. And you're one of the few people I know back home in Canada who's a member of a public sector union. And like, this is what am I missing? What happened? It can't just be everybody got their brains zapped by the media. Like there has to be some deeper thing going on.
No, actually, I think you banged that nail on the head. I think it absolutely was just a fabulous performance by our propaganda state-run media. Um, uh, and I've got a little quote here. Through some of my dealings with the labor unions, I came across some minutes of the Ontario Federation of Labor, the OFL, and most recently during the support workers strike, the OFL rallied for the cause, and all kinds of unions who are under their umbrella stood up and said, no, we want this for our workers. And I thought,
well,
oh, great.
Can you remind us all what this particular action was about, just for people that don't know?
Sure. So here in Ontario, the education support workers, early childhood educators, the custodial staff, there's the lunchroom supervisors, the office administrators, all of those folks are in a different union from teachers. And they had been working without a contract since the summer and couldn't bargain effectively and voted in favor of a strike, which would have ground everything to a halt in terms of schools being open, which you can imagine after all the closures, was not a very popular opinion for most people to be considering their kids at home. And so there was a lot of conflict, but basically the Ford government tried to fix it so that their strike was illegal. So taking away the workers' right to strike. And that's what woke up the OFL and got them to push back. And with the support of many unions, that legislation was overturned very quickly. And the province began bargaining in good faith and a contract resolution was made. But the OFL, when you when you look past that most recent job action, no, that what you said about the Marxist workers' body autonomy and the sort of worker as the most important piece, right? And it's your body, and if you can't keep it in good running condition, then how on earth are you going to be a good cog in the wheel or the machine? So there was actually a note in one of the the meeting minutes saying that the OFL had in-depth discussions around the language used by the Freedom Convoy, and they quote specifically the phrase "our bodies, our choice," and how they were concerned that it was being co-opted, and that they wanted to express that specifically the OFL was not in support of the convoy. They wanted to express concern about hate because saying "my body, my choice," Gord, is obviously a hateful thing to say if you're saying it as a worker who is I don't want to use the word vaccine hesitant, so I'll say who is in conflict with the current political state of affairs. Can we just say that?
Sure.
They also had a problem with the flag. The fact that the convoy was using the nation's flag was very problematic for them, and they wanted to separate themselves basically from the unsafe
on the flag thing.
behavior.
It's very interesting on the point about flags is that you get the same thing. I live in the United States now. You get the same thing here. There's a certain cohort of quote unquote the left who really can't. They really find people expressing any pride or solidarity in where they come from and the country they live in, which, the more conspiracy minded might place the blame for that at the sort of international corporate bodies as represented by places like the WEF setting agendas. But anyway, it's just really interesting how using symbolism of representing it where you're from and the fact that you're happy to live there and have some kind of pride in it is now seen as like problematic and a bad thing. And my body, my body, my choice. It's something else that was really interesting to me. I ended up on Fox News, as you know, because there's a lady at Fox News named Laura Ingraham who read one of my articles at Newsweek and wanted me to come on her show and talk about it for all of 4.5 minutes, where she did most of the talking. But I took that opportunity knowing full well that Fox News lights a lot of people's hair on fire. Fair enough. I didn't get an invitation from anyone else. So anyway, I did the Fox bit. Day and a half later, my Twitter account got nuked, and one of my oldest friends, a woman I've known since I was 4 years old, sends me a text message saying, "I don't know who you are anymore, WTF." And I can't remember what I said back, but I'm like, this thing is about bodily autonomy. Like, you're into bodily autonomy too, I'm assuming, being a woman and concerned about a woman's right to choose. And she said, "That's just bullshit. You don't actually mean that." It's like, it's amazing how other people can reach into your heart and your mind and tell you that you don't actually mean what you say. It's very convenient.
There's a lot of that going on right now, actually. It's very, very popular.
Yeah. And another thing, if I may, just one more thing on this note was that, like, a lot of the reaction in the media in Canada to the Freedom Convoy imported American politics into it. Like, there was the accusations that the Freedom Convoy was all Trumpers and financed by Donald Trump and gazillionaires in the US. And we all know that's been proven incorrect. At the POEC and in Parliament, Give, Send, Go and GoFundMe said the money was like 88-90% from Canada and small donations. But one of the things that a lot of the left media people, which is to say all media nowadays, was that, the Freedom Convoy probably doesn't believe in a woman's right to choose, and they're going to get rid of abortion in Canada. Like, they're importing the American abortion debate, which has been around our entire lives, into a different country and into a political situation where it's not relevant because it's not a question in Canada. And nobody in the Freedom Convoy said anything about abortion. Nobody cared. It was never brought up by anyone. It was a matter of, we would like to choose to make our own health decisions, given the information we know about the virus, the vaccine, and our own, our own personal health history. That's up to us and not the state. And we shouldn't be coerced, and we shouldn't lose our jobs. We shouldn't be mandated to take this thing, which, that's right. My body, my choice. But like all of these blood, man, I want to be nice, but like these people made
Don't
it.
be nice. That's not why we're here.
But these rather unfortunate souls decided to make it about an American political issue because they had no argument, right? They were showing themselves to be hypocrites, and then trying to backfill over top of that so that they didn't look like hypocrites. They did the same thing that the Canadian media always does: import the neighbor's politics and run around going, oh my God, the American heathens are coming, right? Because they have no argument.
Agreed. And it doesn't take much to see it as that. You'd have to have a modicum of self-awareness and, maybe not have burned your last critical thinking cell. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we're in a society in Canada and certain provinces like Ontario and BC in particular, where the messaging is just so strong, and people don't. The lockdowns did a great job of wearing people down. And most people were delighted to see some kind of light at the end of that tunnel. So when you look at the stats of the uptakes of those experimental injections, for teachers, it came in late August of 2021. And they said, you're going to need this to keep working. And I was out for dinner with my in-laws, and I had to leave the restaurant. Like, I felt physically ill. It came on over the radio while we were eating, and I just thought, oh my God, this puts everything in a different perspective. Here it is. That conspiracy has now turned to fact, like so many others. And yeah, the whole my body, my choice, not only are most people still even not really able to make a good argument as to why that overreach was acceptable, but when you put it in the perspective of someone like me who does support bodily autonomy in all things, and then you look at all the fights that the union has fought for the century or more, that teachers have been working for better conditions, none of it makes any sense, man. None of it makes any sense. And I'm somehow the bad guy because I didn't buy it, and I wasn't afraid to say, I think this is wrong and I don't buy it. And maybe you should consider also not buying it for all of these reasons that are
right. I don't even think people didn't not have to buy it. Like, I mean, I was happy to let other people buy whatever they wanted, as long as they left other people to make that same choice of whether to buy it or not. But it's never reciprocated that way. And the whole COVID thing proved that, like, many of our fellow workers and citizens are wannabe gulag camp guards or members of the Stasi, because like there was no like your body, your choice, or it's up to you to make a risk calculation on the benefits of whether or not to get vaccinated. That's up to you. It was, you will get this vaccine, or we are going to give you the silent treatment, bar you from all social interactions, and in the case of the federal government, bar you from getting on airplanes, fire you from your job, and create, like, what I like at best can be described like a medical apartheid state. And because they won't leave you alone, like, we extend them, I would like to extend them that courtesy. You want to take the vaccine, go ahead. You want to hide, you want to wear a mask, you do what you need to do. And like I have cousins that are maybe a little obese. I have my one cousin's husband had respiratory issues right when COVID first hit. So she was reasonably freaked out about her husband catching this thing. And that's totally legitimate. Do what you got to do.
It's not legit. It's not legit, man, but that's a discussion we'll get to. But so, the first call I made from the parking lot of that restaurant was to my union,
Right.
saying, "Hey, I've got to be at work in 10 days. I just heard this on the radio. Like, what's next for me? Because I'm not taking that, and I have every right to say no. And what's your role in terms of supporting me as a member?" And I'll tell you what, it was very clear to me, and not much of a surprise, though a great disappointment, that they had no intention of supporting me from the beginning. And it was, like you said, everyone in lockstep, including those unions, where I was being sent on wild goose chases with information that was incorrect. Um, and I would come back to them with correct information and legislation and things that were in place here in Ontario to protect people like me. And it fell on deaf ears. And finally, basically, it ended with them saying, "Good luck, you're on your own." Um,
Wow.
and yeah, it was pretty bad. Like, for instance, the lie around the creed, exemption based on creed or religious grounds. Um, they said to me that in order to apply for that, I would need a letter from my, faith provider to prove what a good, faithful person I was in the faith of my choice, which would then mean, gold star for you. You are really a firm believer, so this person gets an exemption. Well, except for the rules changed not too long ago, saying no, nobody needs a letter from anybody except themselves, because if you tell me you're a man, but really you're not, I have to take you at face value. I don't need your doctor's letter to say, yeah, this guy's really a guy. They're sending people to jail for misgendering people, and they don't need letters to say, I'm a lady, I'm a man. And so they extended people of faith the same courtesy to say, no, we don't need your letters from faith providers. But my union told me that I did. And so I wasted a ton of time in terms of my fight back with the board and my approach, because I didn't have someone who would vouch for me. And even when I went into the Philodex and looked up faith providers who we had a relationship with, they were also in all lockstep, where no one was permitted to make any such letter on behalf of anyone, because it came down
because there's a new
from
god.
there.
There's a new god in town. The old gods are no longer relevant, and the new gods of the state and progressivism, which is the new state religion, have taken over, and your faith in your old religions, that doesn't count anymore.
Well, they would like for that to be the case. But if you are a persistent person who doesn't like to be told no, then with time and effort, patience and grit, you can, in fact, get them to admit fault. So it did take most of the school year, but my exemption based on creed was not rejected. It wasn't accepted either, but I like to think that in terms of where my own school board stands, that the series of documents that my husband, who's also a teacher with the same board and in all the same unions, the series of documents that we submitted to the board for our exemption, and then consequently to the Human Rights Board at my school board and then the human rights people at the province, it was pretty clear that they didn't have much of an argument. So I like to think that our small role in it had some positive outcome for many. When you look at the numbers of how many people were, teachers specifically, applied for an exemption for the vaccine. I have the numbers right in front of me. So active and compliant people on staff who were deemed compliant with that procedure was 90%. That's almost 40,000 people. 1.7% were seeking exemptions. The others were on leaves or non-compliant. They'd already left by that point. The people seeking exemptions, 0.2 of that total. So 72 people out of a staff of more than 40,000 were asking for medical exemptions. And the creed exemptions, there was roughly just under 650. And do you know how many medical exemptions they granted out of those 72? They granted 24 out of 72 people. 24 people out of a staff of more than 40,000 were granted medical exemptions. And the creed exemptions are even more interesting. So of the 650 people who applied for creed exemptions, do you know how many were denied? I don't. I do. And I know how many were, it's 0. They didn't deny anyone and they didn't approve anyone either. And that's where it gets really funny because that's when it became clear, I think, to the people at the TDSB who are very, they're very careful around litigation and they want to keep themselves out of court as much as possible. And a lot of the rules that they make are simply for that purpose, is to keep them out of court.
So you get a non-answer and a way out for them, while also, so basically they're not backing you up, but they're also not saying no, but they're also not putting anything on the record so as to cover their asses. And there's no spine anywhere. It's just nothing happening all the way around.
Oh, there's a spine. It's just hunched over, like pissing in a corner somewhere. I honestly, it's the fact that they didn't approve a single exemption based on creed should have a lot of people up in arms, because that's an essential tenet of our so-called society, is that we respect the differences of others. We have the right to believe the things that we want. You can worship in whatever way you see fit, and provided you can back that up, no one can question that, and no one can say no, you have to. No one can say that. But they continued to say that.
Right. Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, much like the United States Constitution, on which it was somewhat built around, are effectively toilet paper these days.
They certainly are. They certainly are. So yeah, I mean, am I a big fan of the union right now? No, I'm not. And when I got the opportunity to work at the provincial level on a labor committee, I was pretty excited. I'm not going to lie. I applied. They were looking for people. I applied not only to the labor faction, but there were some other things going on. Did I want to be a part of the diversity, inclusion, and equity committee, Gord? No, I didn't. I didn't apply for that one. But I was accepted to the labor. And I'll tell you, it was eye-opening to sit in a room with people who were still double masked, and frankly, were noticeably, visibly shaken when I dared to ask a question like, this OFL, my body, my choice thing, what's all that about? Because I had to be sort of careful too. I didn't want to out myself entirely as a person who was obviously crazy wearing a tinfoil hat. But it hasn't looked good so far. But I'm not entirely sure I'm gonna give up just yet.
Yeah, so a Twitter friend of mine, back when all of this was going on, had found a bunch of lefty types speaking amongst themselves about all of this. And he sent me this tweet from a woman who is a shop steward, I guess, at for the Teamsters at some trucking company, I don't know, somewhere in Ontario. I mean, Teamsters only represent like 5% of truck drivers. Truck drivers as like a job classification are mostly vastly non-unionized. Anyway, this Teamsters lady was spurging out on Twitter because she could not believe that a bunch of the guys that work where she worked were disobeying the union by going to the Freedom Convoy. And she was citing the legitimate statements that, the head of the Teamsters Union in Canada had made on their website, basically, denouncing the Freedom Convoy, smearing us, repeating all of the thought terminating cliches, all the buzzwords, and the Teamsters, basically showing themselves to not believe in bodily autonomy either. And this woman just couldn't believe that, men on her shop floor had broken ranks and gone to support their fellow drivers at the Freedom Convoy. Like, she was apoplectic at the thought that anyone in her membership would associate themselves with those evil fascists demanding that people have the freedom to choose what to put in their bodies. I mean, look out, we're dangerous, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. As someone who teaches how to think critically as part of my day-to-day, it's astounding to me how many things do people have to be met with before they can see there's cracks, there's chinks in that armor. Like the boxes of masks that say they don't protect against the virus, the antigen screening assessment form because as a person who said no to those injections, I then had to test. First it was twice a week and then 3 times a week, and the screening form for that, the early antigen tests, clearly said that it isn't recommended for the use in individuals without symptoms. Well then, okay, here's me asymptomatic, but I'll go for it because I'm a good employee and I'd like to keep those checks rolling in. But so many things, I just, sometimes it's okay to be in disagreement with what authority is saying. And definitely to be able to consider not just what's right in front of you on that TV screen, and not just to consider what has come down the pipe through history or your version or your experiences in the past. Like, look at it with fresh eyes. Do those people breaking ranks have something maybe that you should be also considering as necessary? Like, I don't know, Gord. I don't know. It's I guess my faith in humanity still exists because I continue to be surprised, astounded even, at the fact that so many people are still not with us.
Well, I don't know. I wonder, a question that myself, yourself, a bunch of our mutual friends and other people I discuss with all over the place are wondering when many different shoes are going to drop. And one of them one of these shoes is like, are we ever going to get a reckoning about what happened? And I mean, that's a big question because it takes in so much, because the COVID regime replicated itself all over the world. We've witnessed this massive transfer of wealth, the largest single transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top in society in human history. We've witnessed all of these institutions abandon all of their stated principles. We've witnessed one of the largest psychological warfare operations ever employed in human history. We've watched a scapegoating and outgrouping campaign against those of us who dissented against it that would have been worthy of Joseph Goebbels. And if you actually understand the history of the Nazis, they used terms like health and cleanliness, and they had, what was the term? Freiheit passes. Like, you had to have health passes in Germany. The whole idea, you must show your papers to travel within your own country. In Canada, the creation of this like biomedical surveillance garbage with ArriveCan. We've just witnessed so much in the last 2 years. Like, it was just it's incredible how much has taken place, and how so many people, as you alluded to, just sort of shrugged their shoulders and either allowed it to happen or explicitly agreed with it, and abandoned all of their principles. Well, I mean, if they had them in the first place. But I guess where I'm going with this is the question about a reckoning. It's quite obvious when you take everything I've just said, take all of that context, and then overlay it on the fact that, like, prior to COVID happening, we already had a problem with, like, democracy being in question, elites and political parties like paying no heed to the people anymore. And if you disagree with what they say, they just put you in the box of like populist or deplorable or whatever. And in that context, like, it doesn't seem like we will get any kind of accountability from any of these people, because even before COVID, there was no accountability to be had for anything. Like, you and I are in similar ages, and we've grown up under the shadow of the Bush administration, Iraq War 2.0, 20 years of Afghanistan. What was it? 157, 158 Canadian soldiers died over there, and for what? And no accountability has ever been forthcoming for any of this. 2008 financial bailouts, just all of the garbage we've been putting up with, and never any accountability. So it would be folly to expect we're going to get any out of anyone for anything that's gone on within or attached to COVID in any way. And so how do we have a reckoning? How do we balance the scales? I mean, but one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on here, because I think you're quite thoughtful about these things, is just to get your opinion on that. Mine is that we're only going to be able to have it like between friends and family if any of them those damaged relationships are salvageable now. Like, I still have members of my family that still don't talk to me. I've got the silent treatment, whatever. I guess I've returned it in kind. It's might be my own fault too, but like, where do we go from here to like keep everything together and return to sanity, given that accountability and a reckoning with the state and its handmaiden corporations and media and the establishment, such as it is, like, that it's just not going to happen?
Well, I agree with you there. I mean, as things started to come out in the media, underlining the things that we have been saying all along, and admitting that there's truth to those things, that all of the things that we've been saying are true. You're able to sort of pick up on those things in the mainstream media or the government state media, whatever you want to call it. But is there going to be a reckoning on a scale where we see public leaders, walked off in shackles and they get long prison sentences, and there's a very satisfying, you know, jury of 12 judging them? No, of course, none of that's going to happen. It's never happened, and it's definitely not going to happen this time around. Would it be, we can't count on that. I think that's pretty obvious. No one's coming to save us. The government isn't coming to save us. The military is not coming to save us. The courts aren't coming to save us. Reality exists in the human mind. And whatever reality you've been living for the past almost 3 years, that's going to have a lot of influence on whether or not you think there should be amnesty for these folks, and what your idea of a reckoning even looks like. For me, it would be very satisfying to see Chrystia Freeland come to the end of her life like any good Gorgon does. But I don't think that that's going to happen. Realistically, I don't think that I can look forward to that satisfaction. So what do we do instead? We make ourselves strong and healthy, and financially strong and healthy, and we build ourselves up with groups of people who are, if not like-minded, then at least sympathetic, and we manage as best we can. Because while our country has, and I say our country, Canada, but states, and I think the West in general, we have a lot of great things and a lot of opportunities. Those are not all those great things and all those opportunities aren't going to be available to everyone in the way that they have been in the past. And I think the quicker people get on board with that understanding, the better off we'll be. Looking at the banking situation, how banks just pulled their services from people who were ideologically in conflict with what the government is
that's
supporting.
Continuing, FYI.
I know. I know.
The case of this Jeremy McKenzie fellow is quite alarming. I mean, yeah, he's a bit of a loudmouth. May have said some unadvisable things in the second iteration of his show, but no criminal record, no history of violence, spent 15, 16 years in uniform of the Canadian Armed Forces, has done nothing except say very publicly that the government's out over its skis and is doing things that it shouldn't be doing, and now is finding himself basically deleted off the banking system even after Emergencies Act is gone, and it's almost like a year after that whole shit show. And I mean, he's literally an enemy of the state. And at this point in Canadian history, and we have enemies of the state. And there's no judge or jury or anything. Someone at Scotiabank either made the decision or was told to make the decision by someone under the employ of Freeland or someone else in the government, just to say, F this guy. And now he has no recourse, no way to pay his mortgage, no way to pay for his children, no way to get money sent to him. Also, while he's fighting a court battle in Saskatchewan over a bunch of bogus charges that they threw at him to try and put him in jail during the Public Order Emergency Commission, ironically enough, even though they sent a camera crew there to get his testimony at the POEC, because the media had memed himself into believing his make-believe country that him and his friends came with were a legitimate threat to the state. So, I mean, I want to bring Albert Camus back from the grave to write an absurdist novel based on what's happened in Canada right now. I mean, it's absurd, and it's sad, and it's bad, and it's a problem all at the same time, right?
And it's writing itself before our very eyes. Yeah, you can't make it up. You couldn't make it up if you tried. I mean, I guess 1984 was made up, wasn't it? And it reads like a how-to manual for the current state of affairs. But yeah, I mean, the reckoning is going to look different in different communities, but I think overall, well, let's just go back to the language of emergency. That was something I felt was real, but there's so many red flags that people are willfully blind to. Like so backing it up to about a year ago when people's bank accounts were being frozen for donations to the convoy. This sent a message internationally to folks screaming, hey, Canada's not a serious country. Don't invest with us because look at what we're doing. And I think it was really positive on that respect because Justin Trudeau, Christia, they jumped the gun and they made it dangerous for themselves. Them making the decision to do that put them in a very unflattering light internationally. Now, here they're doing it again with Jeremy, but things being what they are in Canada, we're also quiet and soft-spoken and mild-mannered that it doesn't get the traction that it should, right? So while people internationally were like, wow, what's going on with Canada? Maybe we shouldn't invest in a place that does things like that. People here like, oh, well, don't do what the government tells you not to do because that's a consequence. And it's nonsense. But now you see I've lost my train of thought, Gord. I just want to go off and vent about the government.
Well, I mean, me podcast, Sue podcast. You go right ahead, darling.
I don't know. I just think it was a blessing that they did that and it caused a little bank run and it made some people who were not otherwise sympathetic to the convoy. It made a lot of people, I mean, maybe not a lot, but it made some people take notice, which is great. And then you have the emergency, the commission, where Jeremy got to speak and so many other people got to speak about whether or not it was legit that the Trudeau government called for an emergency act to be bringing down the law on those good folks in Ottawa. And now I have to say, I wish I had it in front of me because I could reference it a little more clearly, but there was all kinds of basically a semantic discussion about the word emergency and what it is and how it affects Canadians. Now, the Emergency Act is there for emergencies, like you're in danger, it's peril, you are in physical threat of physical harm and the harm to your homes and families, and it's like a threat, like a physical threat, not an existential threat, and definitely not a financial threat. And that was something that I just thought, can we just leave language out of it? Language has already seen so many disgraces lately. Whether it's pronouns or whatever. But then trying to say that the emergency in question was in fact a financial emergency and an economic emergency, that these good people barbecuing on the clean shoveled streets behind their trucks were somehow putting the economic health of Canada at risk in such a way that it was then the emergency. I just thought, are people buying this?
I know. We'll put the shoe on the other foot. Like, if we want to talk about putting the economy in peril and putting economic lives and people's economic opportunities at risk. I mean, just shut the country down for year and a half straight. That's what does that just come without a consequence? Printing money.
The consequence was your health and safety, Gord. Think of grandma.
Yeah.
Think of grandma in 2 masks in isolation, not able to hug her loved ones. Wasn't that for the best, Gord? Wasn't it?
Well, on that count, Andrew Cuomo, Francois Legault, and Doug Ford, much like a few other people I won't bother naming right now, should be afforded the opportunity of a one-way trip to a lovely, warm destination like Fallujah or Mazar-e-Sharif, dropped off in their pale white skin and basking in their white privilege in their suits, and given a revolver with 1 round in it and told to have a nice day. That's, I think, if we're talking about grandma and all of the old people who are basically murdered by policy, yeah, those 3 gentlemen there, yeah, I wouldn't show them a whole lot in the way of mercy.
Nor would I. But, Gord, those just aren't our decisions to make. So here we are. I mean, what's going to happen is maybe something like what happened with our friend Jacinda. Like, I could see maybe, and it's a stretch, but it could happen that Justin resigns and Chris just steps in. That would be a nightmare in and of itself. But that's really the most that I can see happening on the federal level in terms of consequence. Like, and even that is a stretch. I don't think he's going anywhere. But I will say public opinion is not in his favor. So with any luck, well, what would I like to, with any luck, they'll all be too sick to go to work forever, Gord, and we'll just have to start from scratch. Burn it all down is what I say, and let's see what we can come up with after that.
Well, it seems like the immolation is probably going to come from within and won't require us to provide any catalyst or ignition. Like I say, I am one man of one family amongst millions of families, and ours didn't get affected that badly, other than like division and emotional damage. I mean, a lot of people have had it a whole lot worse, and a lot of people are going to continue to have it worse as these gene therapies start racking up more in the way of collateral damage, as it were. And those people deserve a reckoning far more than I do.
Well, we've had our reckoning. I feel like we've already had our reckoning, and it's not over. I mean, we're not making the front page of the Toronto Star anymore with people wanting to jail us or worse. But I will say, those emotional and social implications are also a form of reckoning, right? A lot of irreparable harm was done in a lot of people's families and circles of loved ones. And that's not something to take lightly. I think it's really a big part of the whole PSYOP is the damage that came out of the division in families and the isolation of individuals. And, it's something we'll be dealing with for a long time.
Unfortunately, that is true. Oh, yeah. Man, heavy stuff.
A little bit heavy. It doesn't have to be. I'm pretty positive when I think about what's coming next for me personally. Like, I'm still going to work, which is great. I still get to influence young people to do things in a way that is just and good. So, I have some people like you who I can use as a sounding board, and that's great. But yeah, I've lost a lot of there were some ugly things said by a lot of people close to me. But
So on that note about ugly things being said, after I had gained a little bit of notoriety for sticking my head up to say, the media and the government are lying about the Freedom Convoy and have been lying to us about many things, and this is not on. I was sent quite a few screenshots from social media platforms I do not participate in, of people commenting on my newfound fame and what I was saying, and saying rather nasty things about me or making insinuations such. And I thought to myself, most of these folks know my phone number or my email address, or could, if they don't, they could get it very quickly through somebody else that's also in these screenshots. And I haven't heard a peep out of any of them. The lack of curiosity, like, oh, wow, one of our friends ended up writing for Newsweek. How did Gord end up on Fox News? Like, none of that. Not like, hey, maybe we should call him and ask why he thinks the way he does. What makes him present these ideas and these opinions and positions? What's going on with Gord? Maybe I should call him. Maybe I should send him an email. Hey, how's things? Why are you supporting the Freedom Convoy? Nope, none of that whatsoever. Just Gord's a fascist. Gord's a Trump supporter. How is it all these people in our community are all suddenly right wingers? Like, everyone's brains just turned right the fuck off. No.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be a common sense revolution. You know that already.
My wife is commenting from the background, which is one of the things she does that I hate the most. And she knows I'm recording a podcast, and yet she's doing it anyway. I can't even get any respect in my own household, never mind from distant family and friends. Oh.
You can edit that out.
I'm recording. Jesus Christ Almighty. I don't think I'm going to edit this out. I think I'm going to let it ride just to show people what I'm going to have to put up with here. Yeah. Anyway, where were we?
I think right around the time when
people's brains turning off.
People's brains turning off because it's a little bit easier. I think human beings in general take the easy route, path of least resistance. And there has been so much opportunity to do just that in the last 3 years, for better or worse. A friend, someone who we considered a close friend, was sent a photo of my son at the time. He was 9, and we were at the Saturday protest in downtown Toronto that was their sort of response to what had happened in Ottawa. So we couldn't exactly call it the Freedom Convoy, but there were a row of big tractors at Queen's Park and, happy people with signs and flags. And my son was in a photo in front of some naysayers who were upset with all of these feel-good freedom lovers, with his own little sign that said, "Loving your enemy is the biggest flex." So if you can picture that, some surly folks saying, tinfoil hat, go home, etc. And this little kid in his snowsuit and a handmade sign that said, "Loving your enemy is the biggest flex." And sending that to a friend and getting a one-word response in return. And that word was Nazi. And to me, that changed my perspective. The friend is a Jew, which only adds insult to injury.
Oh yeah, I
That
get that.
he
I get that all the time too. The accusations of me being a Nazi and a fascist are hilarious, given that I'm married to a woman of Jewish extraction, which kind of makes this little girl right here sitting in my lap also Jewish. Um. Anyway, yeah. Again, the thought terminating cliches abound, and I don't even know if it's worthwhile addressing them sometimes. But
it's probably not. It's probably not.
say hello,
Hey,
Georgia.
sweetheart.
Georgia, can you say
She
hi
looks
to
like she
D?
just woke.
Can you say hi to D?
No way. You're not gonna say hi to me. Forget it.
Someone's
He
being
just say
shy.
stuff. Oh, cutie. We do it for them, man. We do it for the kids. We do it for their kids.
Well, our society, such as it is today, at one point was based on a set of principles, and many of which were put under a stress test the last few years. And as I mentioned to someone the other day, abandon certain principles at your own peril. And it's because of this little one right here and her sister that I'm unwilling to abandon these things, because that which makes our society great, you can't just throw away. If that does that make me a conservative now? I don't know. Maybe in a way. You can't tell
What's
people what to put in their bodies. You can't coerce them out of work and being able to provide for themselves just because they disagree with the government. And all
but
of that stuff was bad. Pardon me.
well, I just, you said, does that make you a conservative? And it makes you think, like, why is it that conserving money is a good thing and conserving the environment is a good thing, but conserving values isn't? Like, I just don't understand how. And again, it's language, right? There's been so many linguistic loopholes and games being played. Um, it's something for the textbooks, for someone smarter than me to sit and pick apart and analyze. But I just think it's it's okay to be conservative. It's okay. Don't don't tell me otherwise.
Right. Well, I've kept you here quite a while, D. Any further thoughts? I mean, one of the purposes of this show is to let other people have their say. I mean, I'm just here to kind of add ranting and keep things
I
rolling, as it were.
I love that you're keeping things rolling, Gord, and it was a great honor to be invited on. I think we had some good chats. I hope we weren't too tangential or divergent in terms of where the conversation flowed, and that people get something out of it. I'll be
Well,
tuning in,
yeah, yeah, no sweeter sound than that of your own voice, huh?
right?
Final thoughts on like membership in a teachers union, Ontario Federation of Labor. Do you see a reckoning with those guys? Are they going to try and find their principled center again, or is it a lost
Oof.
cause, or what do you reckon? What do you think?
Personally, I would love to see it all disbanded and start from scratch. I think we do need a union. I think everyone needs to work collectively, but I don't think it's possible under the current leadership. Probably in my career, the rest of my career will be under these circumstances. But will there be a reckoning for them? Depends who's got the dirt on who. Somebody from the OPSU union um, just got busted for embezzlement, like stealing funds or misappropriation of funds. So I think as you get higher up in those ranks, you make mistakes or poor choices. And if somebody knows about them and they want to get back at you, they'll use them against you. And so, with any luck, all those dirty secrets will come out and we can start fresh. But I won't hold my breath on a federal level.
Okay. Yeah, Well, like I say, the reason I asked you to come on, I've never worked in a union. I mean, I've read about them. I've had to deal with them, or at least some of their employees at various sites I've picked up and delivered loads over the years. Um, Somebody tried to unionize one workplace I worked at in Toronto a long time ago where I was hauling fuel. That didn't take place. So my exposure to them is like, a couple of lines away, so to speak. I've read quite a bit about Jimmy Hoffa, just because the history of the Teamsters looms large in my particular industry. But again, I'm ambivalent about it. Like, I'm not for or against unions. I understand they had their place in history. I have to wonder if there was like some kind of return to a based Teamsters union that's a little more like Jimmy Hoffa with maybe a little less corruption might be helpful. And given that, in my writings and in my defense of the Freedom Convoy and what I've seen go on out there, like you said, they need to be started over because none of them stood up for anybody's bodily autonomy. They all immediately caved to the government. I got no time for any of that.
I hear you, man. Yeah, well, time will tell. Time makes more converts than reason, I'm afraid. I think that's Thomas Paine. I could be wrong, but we'll see. We'll see how it all ends up. As I said before, I have an unwavering faith in humanity, and I'd like to see us come out on top, just as we are, with no chips or funny DNA, no.
Yeah, like you said, it's going to take time. The reckoning, such as there's going to be one, is going to take a lot of time. A lot of time, a lot of distance, a lot of self-reflection. And it seems to be that self-reflection's a lost art amongst a certain crowd of people these days. So yeah, it's definitely going to take time. On that note, I'm going to bid you farewell and happy Sunday. I think I've kept you long enough.
Thanks, dude. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on. Like I said, I appreciate your insights into your corner of the world of public sector unions. I hope my listeners find it equally useful, and we'll see what they have to say about it, and I'll let you know.
Keep on trucking and all that.
All right, happy trails.